accessing real quick. So again, we are starting to record these so people can catch up on them. So I just hit record. And if anybody's looking for these because you missed a meeting and wanted to see what we chatted about, we have to do a little bit of processing to make sure that we're ready to upload, but we do keep them on our YouTube channel. So if anybody needs help finding that in the future, let one of us know, and we will hook you up with the link. Today, I wanted to at least briefly recap the SEDS announcement press event at BEA. The press seemed a lot more interested in talking about leaf colors and whether climate change was going to impact leaf peeping season, et cetera, et cetera. So they didn't have a ton of questions for us, but Darren and I were still there and available, and it was a good event. It was kind of fun to do something a little bit different, and we were also able to give Tina and Lorna some direct sound bites that they can use. So that happened. It was fun. It was different. And I wanted to share because we've had a couple pieces come out specific to the SEDS since then, and we've been putting those in SRPC's bits and pieces for you to check out. Other than that, I think most of what we have to talk about today is the Build Back Better application. We've been making continual progress on that, but that was something that I thought, after sort of a work week on it last week, that we would want to at least circle back and check in. So Charlie, I know you're kind of on the road, but do you have a general update for the group that you're able to share?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I guess first of all, I would say that we have 8 projects as part of this proposal, and it's all wrapped under a sort of a network hub, which is the central network connecting communication function that engages industry. It's been a lot to sort of wrap my head around because there's so many moving parts, and it feels like every project changes every other day. But I did complete last night what I would call a semi-clean draft proposal, and I would love to get this group to provide feedback and input on that narrative. And certainly we're open to making changes. It's just really a straw person that we put up there. So I'd very much like to get your feedback. Also have a template letter. I just need to add a couple of bullets that provide examples of how each of your organizations could potentially support this proposal. I will share that. I guess one question I have for folks is, what's the best way to share that? I don't know if I have the capacity. If I share it as a Word document, then I would get edits potentially from so many different places that I'm not sure I could keep up. I've already discovered that. We have access to Box at the University of New Hampshire, and we can make it publicly available. So it's just a link that we would send. So if folks are okay with it, I would love to just share the narrative proposal, which is only 5 pages, as well as the letter template via Box, and then folks can pull it from that. And anyone who can access that, I'm certainly happy to digital. Does see anyone, because I'm on a phone, but does that work for folks? Kind of, what do folks think about that?
General thumbs up, thumbs down on working on Box. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs ups, Charlie.
Okay, perfect. And if Box doesn't work for you, just let me know, and we'll come up with an alternative way to do that. And I don't know
when we read it, should we be when we read it, Charlie? Should we be editing it in real time?
Yes, what I would say is if you're going to edit the document, if you can do it in track changes, that's the most helpful. That way we can kind of see what the original text was. So I'm happy for folks to edit the document, but using track changes, we can at least see what those edits are. That would be very helpful if folks could do that. So, And also, if you want to just leave comments, there, you can leave the comment box, the little comment bubble, and provide feedback that way too. So whichever works for folks, that would be great.
Charlie, this is Mark. If I can just a couple of things that might be really helpful, given your various perspectives as you read through the document, if you can kind of put your EDA hat on, that would be very, very helpful for us, because we've been pretty close working with the teams and kind of head down on this. So if you can kind of give us that outside perspective of how the overall pitch reads, whether it's compelling, whether it sets us apart as being unique and differentiates us from the rest of the competition, whether we're telling the right economic story about the impact of the work that we're proposing. Those are the types of comments I think that would be very, very helpful. And anything you can do to help make some of our maybe hand wavy statements a little bit more specific and tied down with data would be very, very helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark, for saying that. And Mark has been great, made a really strong connection. He's UNH's point person with the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and we're in discussions with them about how to engage with them. And Mark has pulled in several industries, so that's been incredibly helpful. So thank you. A couple other items. In addition to the 5-page narrative proposal, there are some appendices that we need to work on. And I have a list of names of folks who, there's an equity piece. We need to make sure that the outcomes of this grant are reaching underserved populations in the region. And so would love help with that. I can draft some language, but I think several of you have volunteered to help with that. So we'll also share that in the coming days once we have at least a start on that draft. So.
Charlie, there's a very specific project that I have in mind that SRPC worked on with Dover. That was a sort of climate equity project. I'm hoping to circle back with the project team on that this week. But it seems like, if a lot of things have been oriented towards how will climate change impact all of these underserved populations, or how do we reach out to these communities to discuss, in real terms how those climate impacts will, affect the community, get feedback. It seems like there should be a fair amount of things that we can leverage out of that, even if it's just we have this existing network of people and stakeholders that we can begin with.
James, that would be fantastic. And in fact, I think there's one project in particular that links to that. We're talking about working with the Coastal Adaptation Work Group, DES, and the Stormwater Center to do a sort of a regional stormwater green infrastructure demonstration site that would bring in civil engineering and other industry to sort of learn about low cost, efficient, and environmentally friendly installs. But it would use that site as a training site for both professionals, but also youth in CTE programs and others. And I think that might be a great place to embed some additional implementation work if we can make that tie-in. As you said, that's probably not the only place, but that seems like one very strong connection there, because it is about living shoreline, coastal resilience. I think there's a strong connection. Right, and
I think it sounds like the project is very much ongoing right now and doesn't have sort of deliverables that we can, or final report kind of analysis that we can point to yet. But it does seem like the timeline standpoint, that project is supposed to be wrapping up by June. So in terms of a handoff from that existing thing to something that we might be trying to scale up at a regional level would mesh very well.
Absolutely, that sounds great. One other quick item, Ben Van Camp, I don't know if you're on the call, but we sort of that. Okay, so Ben, I connected with Ben and Shannon Rogers and those on that group, and we sort of we certainly recognize that tourism, hospitality, recreation is important, it was hard to figure out what a sort of a large scale tangible project was. So one thing, they had a really neat pitch that was really focused on helping communities, particularly in the upper reaches of the watershed, really connect their downtowns with the river and trails and natural amenities. It was hard to find a project, but we think two things. One, I think in extension, we can sort of match some of our outreach programming to support communities in the Seacoast, but we want to have sort of an entrepreneurial, tie that to the entrepreneurial component. There's a lot of potential opportunity for recreation-oriented businesses to develop. And so we were thinking about rolling that under the entrepreneurial accelerator component of the grant, which you'll hopefully see soon. I don't think I can do it justice talking about it, but Ben, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts or comments on that.
No, I think you summarized it well.
And you'll get to see a little more detail when you read the proposal. I'll get that box link out soon.
Yeah, if you can send it to me today sometime, I should be able to push it out to everybody, no problem.
Okay, perfect.
Was there anything else that you were hoping to touch on up front?
I think just really those letters of support are going to be critical. It's probably going to be one thing that's going to determine whether we do or don't make it into phase one. We really need those letters of support, certainly from organizations that are partners in this coalition, but also we're reaching out to industry to get those. So please read through the proposal, and then if you're willing, we highly encourage you to your organizations to draft a letter of support for this.
So Charlie, to clarify, are you looking for individual letters of support from the members of the SEDS in addition to an overall SEDS letter of support?
Yeah, correct. We we were thinking about getting sort of having a letter from the coalition per se, from the SEDS per se, and then having individual organizations also write letters of support on their own behalf, and then obviously reaching out to industry, any industry connections that folks have. And I think Tim Roach, you said that you would be happy to help reach out to communities that might be impacted too. I think that's going to be another critical element too.
Yep. Yeah, we do have a template on that that we were sending some comments back and forth on as late as yesterday. So Charlie, does it seem reasonable that we might be able to send that letter of support template out at the same time as we have the link?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I put it in the same box file just because it was easier. I don't want to have people having to go to multiple box folders, so I'll just dump it in that folder.
Okay.
I just need to do a little. I need to tweak it a little bit, add a few bullets just to give a little more context to it.
Yep.
And one thing I would say about the letter, if you can personalize it, that would be extraordinarily helpful. In my last grant, I forgot to mention that, and all the letters looked exactly the same. So to the extent that folks can personalize it would be helpful.
And then I think one thing that we chatted about a little bit was how to define and describe ourselves in this application. I mean, we've written letters from the Seacoast economic development stakeholders in the past, but I think we wanted to at least take the group's temperature on, this coalition is expanding a little bit beyond, both our normal membership. It's including some folks in other states who, have been joining us for some of these calls, but probably wouldn't be regular attendees at these meetings going forward, sort of once we get beyond the ad hoc application. So yeah, I think my instinct is, we sort of have a name, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And EDA isn't probably going to catch up on all of the nuance, but I sort of wanted to get your thoughts as to whether, we should be making some tweaks to accommodate or acknowledge the fact that we've expanded borders, or if people have strong feelings about keeping things the way they are. I just wanted to throw that out. to the group.
And
Any
James, just
knee-jerk
one quick
reactions?
item.
Yeah, Charlie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if anyone from BEA is on the call, but Teresa Pinto, our liaison, had indicated that Taylor is willing to write a letter because he felt like there was a strong connection to the cedar. So that is, I guess they're framing it in terms of the SEDC. But anyway, I think it's good to get input from folks.
Yep.
Yes, Charlie, I'm here. Yes. Taylor, our commissioner, has agreed to write a letter for this because it's going through our cedars. And of course, the cedars are it's a priority for our division. So super excited that the state's going to be able to put in a letter of support.
Thank you, Teresa.
Oh, you're welcome.
Charlie, would it be helpful? I've got the draft of the proposal up in front of me. I wonder if showing the kind of the draft org chart that we've imagined would be helpful in thinking through where this group slots into the overall structure of the program.
Yeah, Mark, would you be able to share that and kind of walk us through it?
Yep. Yeah, I can do that now, James, if you...
Give me a sec, Mark, yeah. All right, go ahead and try now.
Okay. All right, so I apologize if this is a little bit small for folks, but this is a first attempt at kind of structuring how the different components of this program would fit together. So just working from top to bottom, Charlie will be serving as the PI, as the lead. So that makes UNH, as you'd requested, the group that's responsible for the administration of the award. So that means bringing along our sponsored program support, our communication support, and all those other things. One of the mandates within this competition is that you have to name somebody and or plan to hire somebody in a lead coordinating role. And don't ask me, I forget what the acronym is, but that's what this RECO position is here. So think of that as really the project director for this whole thing. They need to be central to everything and be kind of orchestrating all of the different moving parts. Most likely that's going to need to be an external hire to the project that is specific for launching this particular program. So that person is going to be advised in two ways. So I'll start first on the right, and that is we're imagining an external advisory board to bring a national perspective along. So these would be people that would speak kind of on the larger scale about where major pieces are headed. Where are NOAA's priorities in the blue economy, for instance? What are the national trends that we would be able to piggyback on? Who else is in this space and might we be able to collaborate with? That will then be complemented by a local and regional approach. And so this is where you all come in. So we imagine this Blue Economy Coalition hub, which is the collection of, and I would say anchored by your group, and then augmented by additional partners along the way that make sense. So, you're sitting at the core of this and, looking around to find other nonprofits, other industry partners, other potential regional partners that would contribute to providing perspective on this. We recognize that you all have day jobs. And so what we've kind of imagined here is a series of working groups around areas that would be essential for, sustaining a robust blue economy kind of program. So we've imagined a working group on business and economic development, one on equity, one on facilities and infrastructure, and one on workforce development. So not on here, but I think hidden in a couple of places would be housing, which is near and dear to all of your hearts. I could imagine housing being kind of included in a couple of different places, certainly within facilities and infrastructure, but most likely under workforce development as well. So that would be kind of a nod in that direction without explicitly calling out housing. So we imagine you as being kind of on the front lines of understanding what the regional local needs are in your community, filtering those up into this larger group, working through the central coordinator, this RECO position, who then is responsible for overseeing the projects themselves. In this way, we're imagining that these working groups will also have the ability to improve the projects. And so many of them will have workforce development components, for instance. And so the things that you're learning up here will be applicable to those projects. They should probably be able to report up through you so that you can have a sense for where they're headed and help improve the impacts of those projects as well. So that's the overall structure. And so I would say that your group largely sits over in here as the local regional core of this Blue Economy Coalition hub. Charlie, how'd I do? It's the first time I think we've
Mark,
actually
that was
talked
perfect.
through it.
That was great. Thank you, Mark, for talking through that.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions, and then if others have them, they can chime in as well. At what stage of grant award process would that RECO person come into existence? Because that seems like sort of a very proportionally large expense if all we get is phase one.
Right. No, it would be a phase two hire. So during phase one, you would likely define and refine what the role of that person would be. All of the different structures and the projects specifically are the ones that are going to need a lot of work at that point. And then you go ahead and hire the person with the money coming in phase two. Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, you're committing also. It would be difficult to hire somebody into a very limited role if it's only a couple of months that they would be promised.
Right, and then you also have you sort of had two layers of oversight there between the RECO and your project coordinator. Is it anticipated that that would actually be two people then, or is that sort of a very specific hat that person would be wearing once that org chart starts going down?
This project coordinator position,
Yeah.
James?
Yeah.
That would be an important position. Whether or not it's filled internally or externally, I think is TBD.
Okay.
But what we want to make sure is that the person who's kind of in the middle here has some dedicated resources to oversee. Because I mean, we could be talking about what, $75 to $1 million, $100 million worth of projects, which is a lot to put on a single individual. So, and the university can help in some regards, but having some dedicated support staff for that person, I think will be important. And again, that would be a phase two type of position.
Absolutely. And one sort of distinction is I think of this RECO person as sort of being an engagement lead, building partnerships with industry and thinking at that meta level across industries. The project coordinator would be more to sort of on the ground, hands-on, assisting the different project areas and making sure they're connected. So it would be more operational, I think.
So big picture vision and small picture herding the cats.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. The RECO person is the face, right?
Yeah. Fair enough. Warren, you've been trying to get in for a bit.
Yeah, just two questions. Number one, Buildback Better. I'm hearing in the news a lot of reference to Buildback Better that is part of one of the two infrastructure bills. I can't keep it straight. Has Buildback Better, the grant that we are applying for, already been approved?
Yes, funding has been allocated to invest in these projects already. That's correct.
There's confusion about Buildback Better. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so
No, I think it's the term.
That's
the
correct.
term.
Biden likes to use the term for a whole series of public infrastructure investment kind of programs. This is a specific NOFO under EDA's ARPA allocation.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Yes.
My second question is, you referred to housing as an additional one of those four, and I thought we were staying away from housing because of that, what I'll call HUD competition.
Yes. No, correct. And I apologize if that's what I meant to say, is that without explicitly saying housing, you could imagine how these working groups might want to tackle housing without us putting it in the proposal itself.
Okay.
Right. So we will do a scrub to make sure that houses are nowhere mentioned in this proposal, but there may be a wink and a nod internally, at least, to say, you know what, this is probably the group that could take that on.
Or there are certain things, for example, the infrastructure group, if it truly comes to the point that we're doing a water sewer analysis of what our total regional capacity is, that analysis would be garbage if it didn't account for residential usage, for example. So we would be learning things about housing related activities, but sort of just by happenstance. We in no way, shape, or form are intending to be able to leverage that study to learn things about what our future residential demands might be if we were to expand water sewer that could potentially be used for multifamily. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think when we met with David Cohen, our EDA rep, we asked the question, could we talk about housing and the work in the workforce context in the grant, but not ask for specific money, but use it as kind of match? And his answer was, I would not touch it. So there's a firewall between HUD and EDA. So it would not help our proposal to even mention it. So, which is really unfortunate, but we can backdoor it in other ways.
Charlie, this is Teresa. When you had that conversation with David on his initial thoughts, did he point out places where it needed to be, more robust, like you say, in terms of equity, or what was his overall sense of the blue economy idea?
Well, certainly equity is one of the priority areas that EDA wants us to focus on. And so we have to make not just a case, it has to be a strong case that's woven through the grant. And so I think that's going to be something that we need to pay particular attention to with an eye to how does that weave throughout the proposal. And then the other piece was, and Mark helped me out too, but he talked about, really this is about catalyzing industry and creating jobs. And so we need to provide real data that supports the need, as well as how is the particular project or the project area is going to result in job creation. So we need to be able to make the case that what we're doing is going to lead to that. It can't be hand wavy, it has to be a direct linkage. So that's something that we're really trying to go through. Right now in the proposal, you'll see some metrics that I put in there. I'm going to have to go back to each of the sort of the project leads to make sure that those metrics are realistic. And we did incorporate data elements and references to the extent that we could. But those are two things. Mark, anything else that you can specifically recall?
Well, we had asked the question of whether we were going too broad or not, and whether we should just take one of those particular areas, so say offshore wind, and just drill completely into that. And, I had no idea what the response was going to be. And the response was that this was an okay approach. And that what we would need to do is to make sure that there were some threads connecting them so that we weren't pitching projects that were too standalone. And that there was some, value add that would come to thinking about them as a collection of projects, which is, again, something that we've tried to do, but probably could be strengthened with your help.
Did he give any sense on, I understand that EDA and some of the federal agencies are looking more towards what they call mega regions.
We did ask how they are interpreting the term region. And the response was, you tell us what the appropriate region is for the sector that you're describing. And when we talked about kind of focusing in the New Hampshire Seacoast and extending to southern Maine and North Shore of Massachusetts, he said that sounded, obviously couldn't give us a thumbs up, thumbs down, but that was a reasonable regional approach.
Yeah, I think that's something that we all need to just keep in the back of our minds as we look at these projects. These federal agencies and some of these large international national foundations are leaning towards mega regions. So,
Yeah,
Well, one
we
thing-
did.
Yeah, sorry, Mark.
Yeah,
I was just,
I think
ahead.
we're probably going to say the same thing, is that there's a project spinning up in Mississippi that has some overlap, and we've talked with some of those folks. And we teased the idea of, would it be beneficial for us to point to that as a strength, in that we know that there's this other project, there are these benefits that could accrue if we're both funded. And the response to that was no. And I think largely that, so when you talk mega regions, it depends on what lens you're using. EDA breaks things up, as you all know, through regions and then districts within regions. And I think if our collaborators were all within the Philly region of EDA, that would get a certain response. But since Mississippi's in a different region, the way that funds are allocated at EDA makes that complicated.
is there any collaboration with the group out of Rhode Island? The Blue Economy group down in Rhode Island?
Charlie, I don't think we've reached out to Rhode Island on this.
yeah, no, I'm somewhat aware of it, as aware of another proposal, aware of a couple of other proposals that intersect at certain points, but I think we're distinct enough that it merits our own submission.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that group isn't established, their Blue Economy, I forget what it's called, but it's an accelerator
Mhm.
down in Rhode Island. And I don't know if they're going in on this EDA grant, but I know that they've been in existence and they've had quite a bit of success with startups and entrepreneurism. So I thought,
Yeah.
you know, maybe there's some collaboration point there or some discussions.
You know, there haven't been, but as we think about external advisory boards, for instance, grabbing someone from an established Blue Economy, whether it's an accelerator, initiative, what have you, I think would be advantageous to us.
One connection that we may have is with our connection to the North Shore now. They have an initiative that's really gained support from the Greater Essex Community Foundation, which is a Blue Economy network, which has quite a few members in it across the state and across the region. That network is going to kind of be roped into it. They've done some very good economic assessment, preliminary data work. And I think to the extent that we can kind of model after the efforts that they've already created and launched and expand that to encompass a broader region is going to strengthen our proposal.
Yeah.
So that we do have good conversations, and they also have a Blue Tech Accelerator as part of that network that already exists. And so there are ways to link to that.
Dan, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think either yesterday or prior to that, I sent out to James and I think to Charlie.
Yep.
The Washington State Blue Economy, they're well established with a history and some success. So it might be to have a look at how they've succeeded.
Yeah, Dan, thank you for sharing that link, by the way.
Teresa Walker.
Charlie, can you just remind us of the deadlines for reviewing and getting the letters of support to you? I've got a bunch of folks on standby, so it would be nice for me to be able to share with them those dates. Thank you.
Certainly, the proposal is due on the 19th of October, which is weirdly on a Tuesday, I believe. I don't have my calendar in front of me. The hope would be that we would get all the stuff ready to go because there's a lot of processing that has to happen. So probably at least by Friday, which would be the 14th of October would be ideal to be able to give us the time, and maybe even a day earlier than that. Mark, you're versed in this.
So, sorry, Mark, we're going to get stuff back to you by Thursday, the 14th.
Lights though.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry,
Teresa, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah. So get the letters of support to you and the comments by the 14th, which is a Thursday.
That would be ideal. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Does that give us enough time, or is that cutting it?
No later than Thursday, right?
Right.
No later than Thursday.
Yeah.
Letters can come in, I feel
Anytime.
like those are things we can
Yep.
grab at the end. Comments, especially, substantial comments that would kind of make us rethink how we're framing, I obviously would love to have those sooner than that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
in fact, Mark, thank you for saying that. I think because there's so many moving parts that we're going to have to fix it at some point. I think ideally, if we can get comments by the middle of the week next week, that would be ideal. Just because it takes time to weave those comments in, and it's pretty impossible to do it at the last moment. So if
You're going to
folks-
put it in box to us today?
Yes, I'm going to share that and the letter template as well. So.
Thank you.
Robin?
Hey, James, are we going to do a cooperative letter, or are we looking at we are going to do a co-op?
Yeah, we were going to do both.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously if some of you are able to sign on to a group one, but aren't able to provide your own individual letter, or vice versa, if you prefer to just write one yourself and not be a signatory on the group, we'll work with whatever works for each of you and your organizations. Any other comments, questions, things for the group on Build Back Better / Blue Economy?
I just want to thank everybody for your support on this. I know it trying to come up with something in the 7 weeks that we were given is a bit of a challenge, but really appreciate everyone's support and help.
Darren, I don't get the reference. Okay, does anybody else have anything different they wanted to talk about this morning? I know agenda-wise, we were mostly focused on this, but anything else come up? Anything for the group? Yeah, Warren?
Just a reminder, COVID, for any businesses that you're dealing with, COVID-19 expense reimbursement program applications are due October 1st at 4 p.m. And that would include pro rata expenses. It would include expenses for any business that closed for any period of time. So if somebody closed between April and June, it would include debt service and operating expenses, including rent. So I encourage, when you do talk to businesses, to apply for that if they have COVID-related expenses to grant program. So any questions, you can refer them to me.
And then you guys also have a business survey out right now, right?
We do, and thank you for mentioning that. I'll put everybody should have gotten that. If I find the link, I'll put that link in chat. But we've got a business resiliency survey, part 3, and we feel that this is really important because part 1 was right deep in the middle of COVID, June of 2020. Part 2 was as we were getting out of COVID, spring of 2021. And this is part 3. So it talks about business confidence, how they've been impacted, what they see in the future. It takes absolutely no more than 15 minutes to fill out, but it provides a lot of good data points as to what we're looking at, where we've been, and what we're looking at for assistance and for issues down the road.
Do you have a closing date for that? For when businesses need to get in by? You're muted.
October 1st, Friday.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
And Margaret?
I just wanted to be on everyone's radar that DOT is doing hearings on their 10-year plan, and those communities that are served by Coast, if you have time in your schedule to either submit comments or go to one of the hearings live to support funding for Coast. It is certainly an important economic development tool here in the region. I am on the board of Coast, so that's my commercial message for today.
Is that do people generally feel pretty comfortable with like the transportation world and the 10-year plan and how all those things work? Or is that something that you would appreciate, one of our transportation planners stopping by one week and chatting about?
When you say how things work, you mean the funding or just?
What the 10-year plan is, why we do it, how we do it,
Oh,
what
okay.
other kinds of programs they have from time to time, I guess whatever people's questions might be.
Could be a good topic.
Now, for me, I just think that public transportation is so critical in this area, and I wish we could do more. So I would always welcome a conversation on this subject.
Okay. Maybe I'll see if Colin's free one Tuesday then. Any final thoughts, comments, questions, topics for the group? All right, seeing none. Thank you all. Have a good week.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, James.